Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new revenge stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
First one is titled, "Oh, you don't want to move your cars? I'll tow it then." Senior in college in the US here. I live in a townhouse development, 4 bedrooms per unit with limited parking, only 2 spots per unit, plus a bunch of overflow parking for residents. That's a bit of a walk. We got a good snow recently, so people have been getting pretty lazy about parking in the resident spots since they don't want to hike through the snow. Which is understandable, they're your spots, do what you want. The issue is my next door neighbors never drive their cars anywhere, still covered in snow several days out, and they have let their friends use my unit's spots for a while. Not to mention the obnoxious parties they've thrown during the pandemic with 20 to 30 people, but that's a different matter. This has never been a huge deal. We ask them on occasion to move their cars and they do, and it's been pretty chill. Since the snow people have been very haphazard and lax about moving their cars for when friends come over, which means my roommates and I, who each have a car, so 4 cars for 2 spots, have at most had 1 spot open for us to park in. It's been a pain, and the next door neighbors have been way worse about leaving space for people, and don't move their cars when we ask anymore. Today I was minding my own business and studying with the window cracked open, and one of their friends pulled into our parking spot, and one of said neighbors went out to say hi. Like I said, my window was open, and she proceeds to tell her friend that it's okay, they don't care and they won't tow you in the next 20 minutes anyways. I'll call that a challenge, and with the local towing place being only a mile up the road, I know they can be here within 5 minutes. So my petty self called up the tow company and watched their friends beaten down. Prius get pulled away off to a tow lot, waiting for a sad entitled soul to pay the $150 tow fee. Next one is titled, "Do Not Hurt the Tomatoes." Once, many years ago, we innocently bought a house next door to a retired Marine couple. She was about 6 feet 2 inches and strongly resembled Arnoldites, not a tumor in his current state, and he was about 5 feet 7 inches and probably weighed 130 hash. They were very house, yard proud and thoroughly obnoxious about it. After living next to them for a short time, for some unknown reason, no, really, they decided to mount a campaign of general obnoxiousness against us. It started small, a note on a friend's car that he was 3 inches over on their side when parked on the street in front of our house. Then it escalated rapidly. They reported us to animal control for farm animals inside the city limit. We had 2 Shih Tzu. They were not used to pull a plow. They reported us to the health department for leaving our pool with a small amount of water in it and breeding mosquitoes. It was hydrochloric acid being used to wash the pool and prep it for repair, as it was derelict when we moved in. They reported us for repairing our fence without a permit. Not moving it, not tearing it down or replacing it, we merely nailed some boards back up. They reported us for loud parties, and quiet parties and no parties. They called City Hall on us so often it became a joke amongst those hallowed halls. All the while they continued with the small harassments as well. We ignored all of this, just making sure we had an extra plate for whatever official they called out that day. But then they committed the ultimate crime. We were breakfasting on the patio one lovely morning when I happened to look over and see a sprayer nozzle come through the fence slats. And they sprayed poison on my tomato and jalapeno plants. Now we love our salsa and I make an absolutely exquisite fresh salsa. And they dared spray poison on my tomato and jalapeno plants. Poison my tomatoes and peppers, will you? In Texas that's a killing offense. Sadly, we did not live in Texas, so I was forced to devise my own punishment. One thing about their house is that it must have been built on an ant hill. They constantly fought ants. We regularly heard them complaining about ants as they tried to rid them from their backyard. Our homes were built on a golf course, and being considered patio homes, all had lovely large patios with huge kitchen windows with sliding glass opening onto a pass-through serving counter. So I made a very, very large batch of simple syrup and froze it in ice cube trays. Friends and I would sit on our patio and toss ice cubes. We had a points system that ranged from getting the cubes on the patio, to getting them up against the base of the sliding door, to getting them onto the counter and up against the opening of the window. We gave them ants. Lots of ants. Not being particularly close neighbors, the Marines gave us no warning when they went on vacation. We did notice it got quieter, and I didn't overhear any further discussion between them about the sticky mess that regularly showed up on their patio, but I didn't really think about it. Besides, I was behind on points. So the bombardment continued. The ants celebrated. They sent out telegrams worldwide inviting all of their relatives to move. They had found paradise. The grass was green and there were regular supply drops. They invaded. There were tiny black ants, larger brown ants and big red ants. Hosannas were sung. They built neighborhoods of McCansions. Ant rockets did the can across the counter. They held parades. There were Friday night fiestas with live ant mariachi bands. It was beautmas. I went through 3 5-pound bags of sugar. We knew exactly when the Marines got home from their 6-week cruise. We could tell by the screeches of anguish. Apparently the ants had made their way inside. There were screams from the kitchen, and the pantry, and the laundry room, and the bathroom. It was ear-shattering. Who knew a 5 feet 7 inches male could even make those sounds? Battle was enjoined. The army ants dug foxholes and built redoubts. The fire ants formed special forces teams and close protection units. The war raged for months. Despite regular resupply, the ants were decimated. The Marines were seen collapsed in patio chairs, hollow-eyed with exhaustion, their once pristine backyard closely resembling the aftermath of the Battle of Ypres. Peace talks were held. Détente was achieved. Calm reigned on Avenida Pancho Villa. Until the Marines got their second breath and reinforcements in the form of their son, the Marine Jr. further shenanigans ensued. And yours truly discovered that raccoons are not only exceedingly dexterous, they are inordinately fond of overripe figs. But that's another tale. Next one is titled, "Give me a huge task to do on my last day at work." Okay, I'll leave it unfinished. My last day at work was last week. I had been with this organization for 2.5 years. I loved working here and always gave my absolute best, but unfortunately I had a supervisor who was absolutely biased and favored incompetent employees over me. The problem is that, before her, I worked under another supervisor and he trained me in all sorts of tasks before he left. When my current supervisor took his role, she didn't train each team member evenly and instead made each worker specialize in certain tasks. This would then lead to me receiving more work than others because I know how to get everything done, whereas my team members didn't. I realized that I had enough and that I should move on to another role. Because this was a federal government job, I had to fill out so many forms and get many things done on my last day. On my last day, my supervisor was working from home, and on top of the stuff I had to complete before I leave, she decided to give me 2 big tasks: booking travel and accommodation for 2 trips, and this requires a massive formal process and so many forms to sign. No one else in my team does the travel tasks because they were always assigned to me. After being annoyed for a couple minutes, I decided to leave it and not start on the task, otherwise I would have left work 2 hours after my normal finishing time. That same evening, while I was having farewell drinks with my colleagues, I live in a country where COVID is under great control, I told them how I had 2 outstanding travel tasks that I couldn't attend to because I was already busy finalizing everything. One of my team members said, "Why didn't supervisor give the task to me? I literally had nothing to do today." As if that didn't annoy me already, I also remembered that my supervisor did not even send me a thank you, good luck, farewell email before she logged off. Oh well, doesn't matter. The next morning my supervisor would have clocked into an unfinished task with no one to assign it to because they weren't fully trained on it. A good start to a Monday. Next one is titled, "Don't be an ass to your support staff." I worked as a receptionist for 2 years, and 90% of our business were walk-ins since we were usually too busy to have appointments. The office consisted of 2 office staff and 5 main professional staff, don't want to specify. It was a stressful job, but was a good way to get my foot in the door. One particular professional looked down on the office staff, and made our lives difficult every day. Examples include: 1. Regularly telling us she wouldn't be seeing any customers due to headaches. 2. Would make passive-aggressive jokes and be upset when we didn't laugh because they weren't funny. 3. Trying to blame us when customers lied about what services they needed during check-in. 4. calling the front desk to yell about how many customers are waiting. All the professionals had access to the electronic waitlist information. 5. Disappearing for chunks of time between customers to avoid seeing more customers. 6. Keeping customers checked in on the electronic list to avoid seeing more customers. 7. Would be busy with projects when it was their turn to work late, so we'd have to turn away customers. They never got fired because we had a hell of a union, so she was constantly on probation and did the bare minimum. I left that job a year ago and found another job within the same organization. Someone in our department is preparing to retire soon, and we were discussing possible internal promotions. This is a position former coworker has coveted for a while, and it's really hard to get into due to limited spots. Someone brought up former coworker and asked if anyone had experience working with her. I kept it brief, but basically explained they'd be a horrible fit and I would never recommend her. Moral of the story: you never know who will make or break you in the future. Next one is titled, The Ball Stalker. Twice a week, my hound and I like to go to my favorite dog park. This dog park is relatively large, so I like to have my dog run his energy out by playing his all-time favorite game, fetch. After a long throw, my 10-month-old pup caught his tennis ball and came head-to-head with an older shepherd mix dog, which aggressively ripped the ball from his mouth. Now, as this is relatively normal dog behavior, I wasn't about to make any huge deal of anything, but it is typically common courtesy to return tennis balls to their owners. Or at the very least, not leave the park with another dog's toys. Reuniting with his owner, I kindly attempted to flag them down for the ball back, as it is the most efficient way to keep my dog out of harm's way, e.g. if there is an overtly aggressive dog, to lead him in another direction, etc. The man did not respond but continued to ignore me and his own 2 dogs, walking away, engaged in his phone conversation. With little else to do, I began to follow him in hope of asking him to retrieve the ball from his dog. After he hung up the phone, I tried to alert him once more, shouting, "Excuse me, sir?" Once, twice, 3 times. This bloke did not respond but continued walking in the other direction. Half an hour later, I gave up on shouting after him, but rather frustrated, I continued to follow him from a socially responsible distance. I kept on following him until we reached a fork near the park's entrance, at which point I called my dog, leashed him, and began to leave, to which the gentleman pursued, still refusing to make contact, raised up his arms in relief. Now, I likely should have let this go at this point, but something within me hung on, and after driving away, I looped back around to find the man and his dogs entering his car. I gave him a wave and started following him once more. After about 20 minutes of drive time, a few abrupt turns, he stopped at a liquor store and I waited from a convenient parking space on the street for about 10 minutes, reading up on city laws and ordinances regarding stalking. Seeing me on the way out of the parking lot, he peeled away like a bat out of hell and we went our separate ways. Maybe it's a bit much, but I'll sleep soundly knowing he may be ever so slightly more paranoid, aware of his surroundings, and courteous to the people around him, if only for a little while. Still, I want my ball back. Next one is titled, Endorboy Gives Unpleasant Jerk Weed a Barring. I work at a beer vendor here in my Canadian province. Not exactly glamorous or thankful work. Sometimes for work, we take what we can get. The job is full of nut bars and insane drunkards. Probably shows me at the ground floor as to why the welfare system comes under fire. My co-workers and myself are pretty chill most of the time. Don't be totally flat out drunk, a dick, and obey the rules. There was this one regular. An old fellow. All smiles and stuff. Not really in a meaningful or sincere way. More like a snake or a two-faced hole. Just enough to satisfy who he was talking to. He would come in around 4 to 5 times a day and buy 3 king cans of crap or a 6-pack every run he would make. I was a bit annoyed by him doing this. I figured he was probably coming from work or something. I guess he's blowing off stress. Then comes him barking that we have to take his gross-assed empties 1 minute to closing. After that was his demands that we give him change as we're closing or opening. So he can satisfy a gambling addiction via the video lottery terminals. Asking one of the restaurants and bars waitresses, it turns out he's basically been schmoozing the system for some disability he's had. Of the walking variety. Something that's been going on for allegedly 29 years. Being that my mum goes to work in a wheelchair every day and this bozo has the gall to bike here and walk in with his dog, I all of a sudden really started looking down on this guy. First real incident was that I asked him to not take his debit card out during a security feature that our debit machines have here. It happens when you use the same card more than once a day here. It shows up as declined and we can BS it if we think the card is stolen. More annoying than helpful, generally. Being that this was the second time of the day it's happened, he already knew the score. Feeling snippy, he barked at me to not chide him for instructing him to do something. I rolled my eyes. Second time was my coworker chasing down some thieves and he walks out of the store and laughs at him giving chase. Gets a satisfying "duck you" from an older guy working a double that day. Tries to play it off as a joke but the older coworker is just not having it. Third time was a few days later, when I was getting ready to close the store and walks in with some dripping and disgusting empty beer cans. My coworker and I locked the trailer up so we can close in a timely manner and not have to work unpaid overtime. Not only that, but his empty cans were dripping and pissing all over the freshly mopped floor. Using a great amount of restraint, I ask him politely to come back tomorrow with his empties. Calls us lazy and threatens us with some crock that he conjured up from the liquor commission laws that ended up being untrue. I really didn't like this guy after that. I was waiting for an excuse to be conjured so I wouldn't have to deal with him. So my chance finally came. Our debit machines were acting up on a rainy night. Not only that, but our tills were also low on cash. He comes in for the 5th time in that night. He also demanded for change from a 20. Transaction doesn't go through and I tell him that, low on bills right now. We're not a bank here. Dude flips out, screams that he would get the night manager, not my boss, to fire me. And that he would have my job. That the commission would fine me. A couple other vague and non-specific threats are thrown my way. While this is happening, he storms out with unpaid beer. Now, I was hoping this would happen. The fool ends up doing exactly what he threatened to do and I'm meeting with my boss the next day over this. Hey, there's that stupid old guy who's basically asking me to wash your neck. What happened? I explained that we were experiencing difficulties with debit and had no money in the till. That he technically stole from us. And that he threatened my job. For proof, I showed him the debit slip and the security footage. I was given an okay to bar this guy from the vendor the next time he walked in. He sees my boss and me up front and assumes I've been reprimanded. Triumphantly, he puts his beer on the counter and I put on the biggest, smuggest, and most crap-eating grin I can and say to him, "I'm sorry, sir. But we don't serve thieves here." Guy starts up on a tirade and my boss cuts in and shows him the footage and the receipt. And says it's up to my discretion as to what happens. Guy turns red, then white. Then makes more non-specific and vague threats. Gets off the property. Is barred at the hotel, too. More than a few people around my work applauded me over this. As it so turns out, he's a schmoozer at the local Tim Hortons and McDonald's. The employees there told me that they wished they could have done the same thing. From time to time en route to work I see this schmuck. I give him a smile every time. Next one is titled, "I let his pizza get cold to count his coins in front of his house." I occasionally deliver pizza as a part-time job. There is a customer that tends to pay with a big bag of change. I don't mean a bag full of quarters, I mean a bag full of dimes, nickels, and pennies. Since his meal typically costs about $20, the bag usually weighs several pounds. It is a total pain to count out all of the change, so typically drivers will just assume that he has the correct amount and leave. Usually, he has just enough or maybe a few cents over. I don't think it is an innocent thing either, as he usually gives the bag of change with a mischievous grin. It is such a pain, that most of the drivers know his address by heart, and avoid going to his house if at all possible. I was having a bad night, and by the luck of the draw got this dude's house. I remembered reading a post on petty revenge involving someone paying in a checkout line with a bag of change, and I knew I could use a similar method to take my frustration out on this guy in the pettiest way possible. I pulled up to his house and left the pizza in the car. I rang the doorbell, and when he answered I saw the large bag of change in his hand that I knew would be there. He asked where his pizza was, and I said, "New policy, sir." Gotta count it out before we can give out the pizza. So I sat down on his doorstep and started to count out all of the change. At one point, I even asked if he could turn on his porch light because I was having a hard time seeing. He did end up sitting there while I counted out the entire bag of change, even though it took about 10 minutes. He ended up being about $1 over, so I started picking up pennies to give him his change back when he said that I could keep the rest as a tip. When I gave him his pizza, he sheepishly told me sorry and then shut the door. The whole situation was incredibly awkward, and to my knowledge, he hasn't ordered pizza from us in a while. Oh well. Last one is titled, "Trying to Take Me Home? Better make sure I am who you think." Alright, so to understand the story, you have to understand a few things about me. I am a 19-year-old guy. Bi, with a boyfriend. I'm often told I have a very feminine body. I've posted in the femboy sub here and there with positive response, but this is a throwaway and I'm not going to link anything for privacy reasons. I was out on a date a few weeks ago with my boyfriend, who I'll refer to as Alex, 20. For storytelling's sake, I'll go by Liam. We had just finished a movie date and decided to roam the dark streets of nightly NYC afterwards, just to chat and spend time together, as we don't live together. It's important to note that I was dressed up like a girl. I'm talking a crop top and skirt, plus some thigh highs. Come for me all you want, I like to feel pretty. I was waiting outside the convenience store while Alex grabbed some snacks when a tall man, early 20s and dressed like your local dealer, walked up to me and tried to act sexy. I'll refer to him as Creep. Creep, what's up, baby? You know you shouldn't be out here so late, all alone. I said nothing. Creep, now, come on, babe. When a man speaks to you, you respond. How about we go back to my place? Now, here's something I haven't mentioned. I have a high-ish voice. Still masculine, but high enough to where, if I try, I can muster up a good female voice. So I do. Me, no. Not interested. Creep, come on, I don't bite. I just want to have a little fun. He got closer. I shook my head. At this point, Alex comes out with a bag of our snacks and notices the scene. Alex, everything all right, babe? Creep, babe, what, you're with this loser? Come on, let me show you what a real man can do for you. He put his hand on my hip. Alex started to walk forward, but I signaled for him to stay back. I had a plan. I put my hand on Creep's, then wrapped his arm around me and cuddled into his chest. He smelled like cigarettes, disappointed parents, and failed dreams. I look up at him, still in my girl voice. Oh, him? Don't mind him, if you want me. Then I switched to my normal voice. Then you can have me. Immediately he pushed me into Alex's arms and storms off, yelling obscenities mixed with a few homophobic slurs here and there, plus some transphobia tossed in for good measure. Me and Alex both go into hysterical laughter, nearly falling over each other. Once we calm down, he looks to me. You're really in a hole. You gotta stop doing that to guys. He chuckled. Hey, they all approached me. Thanks for listening.